එකට පටන් ගමු. තව විනාඩියයි තියෙන අම්ම ඕක කරන්න. ඒකනේ. So hope you all can join and listen, hear me. This talk is given in English. Bhante Sankara made the request for me to do the talk in English. I'm muting all the participants so that we will go uninterrupted. Today, anyway, let's begin with reciting Namo Tassa 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Great. So this is the remainder of the Poson full moon day retreat at the Great Lakes Buddhist Vihara. For this talk, I decided to incorporate some of the teachings that Arahant Mahinda used in Sri Lanka. As a great missionary monk, he brought Buddhism to Sri Lanka. He was the son of the great Emperor Asoka, and 2 other relatives of him joined in the mission, and they all came eventually to Sri Lanka. And when they met the Sri Lankan king, the king was a little surprised and taken by seeing these monks. And the king happened to ask, "How did you get here?" And then the king said, it's not, the Venerable Arahant Mahinda said, it's not from land that we came, it's not from the ocean. So the only way they could have come was from air. So that's how his journey happened. Eventually, when they came to Sri Lanka, they began asking questions from the king and slowly understood the wisdom of the king. And the king was so pleased, so delighted by the presence of the Arahant Mahinda and his crew, and gave accommodations, and the king's Queen Anula and about 500 of her following, they all joined the king and began looking after these monks. And they also entered the order as nuns. And he gave a talk from Chullahattipadopama Sutra, the Elephant Footprint Sutra, and also Asivisopama Sutra, the snake similes. And he also incorporated the Anamatagga Samyutta. Anamatagga Samyutta is found in the Samyutta Nikaya, and it highlights the beginningless nature of this samsara. So why don't we talk a little bit about the samsara today? And perhaps we will find answers as to why the Venerable Arahant Mahinda taught the Anamatagga Samyutta to the audience there in Sri Lanka at that time. But keep in mind that when the Arahant Mahinda offered the Anamatagga teachings, I'm going to open it directly from Samyutta Nikaya. So then we kind of interact with the direct teachings there. Anamatagga Samyutta is not taught by Arahant Mahinda. Anamatagga Samyutta, the collection that we find there is taught by Buddha himself. So Buddhahamduro taught the Anamatagga Samyutta. And there you find different people, including some monks, coming to the Buddha and asking questions about how big a kalpa is, how big an aeon is. And then the Buddha responding to them at various occasions. So we will find some repetitions, but since we have time up to 2:30, let's take the time to explore. And when we come to the end of it, my plan is to incorporate some teaching on Paticca Samuppada, the dependent co-origination, into this talk. So stay tuned and stay quietly listening. And because this is done in English, and English is so familiar to you by living here in the West, you will be able to understand it perhaps easily compared to some difficult Pali words. If I do incorporate some Pali words, that is because we are also familiar with them over the time of listening to the teachings. So I trust that if you have any questions, you might send the questions at the end of the talk so we can discuss those. We also can use the chat box for that. So let me share the screen. You see the introduction to Anamatagga Samyutta. This is written by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Anamatagga Samyutta, on without discoverable beginning. So Anamatagga. So Samyutta means the collection, and Anamatagga here means without discoverable beginning. It's so called because its theme is the unbounded temporal extent of samsara. So the samsara continues on and it's endless. So that is why Anamatagga Samyutta is translated as on without discoverable beginning. The term itself differing in the texts of the early Buddhist schools, but the idea it is intended to suggest is conveyed well enough by the second sentence of the opening homily, that a first point of the round of rebirths cannot be discerned. When you extend a thread, you can kind of go after and find the end of it, the beginning of it. But with samsara, you cannot find the beginning. The underlying purpose of this Samyutta is to situate the Buddha's teaching of liberation against its cosmic background by understanding the immeasurable mass of suffering we have experienced while wandering from life to life in unbounded time, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. This reminds me, these two things, ignorance and craving, these two are mentioned in the links of Paticca Samuppada, the dependent co-origination. There is an article written by Bhante Henepala Gunaratana Nayaka Hamduro. The title of the article is Onion is Born. So when I was reading that, I think in 2007, I realized that this is a very creative way of expressing the two sides, ignorance and craving. Ignorance as a mother and craving as the father. So I is in the center. When ignorance is on, on, and craving is also on both sides, and you put I in the center, I on becomes onion. That's how he saw it. The two fathers, ignorance and craving, feed this little child called I. So that is how this onion is born. It's a union. In that, both ignorance and father, ignorance as the mother and craving as the father, they never leave their child alone. Ignorance and craving continue to feed their child, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it kind of never dies. So I think you get the idea there. Let's go to the second part. In sutta after sutta, the Buddha illustrates the vastness of samsaric suffering with awe-inspiring similes, always drawing the inevitable conclusion that we have experienced the suffering of, let me go to the next page. Suffering of repeated birth and death long enough, and it is time to strive for ultimate freedom. This is where you find the answer as to why the Buddha taught this, to kind of spark some inspiration in the followers. So the Buddha sees something that we don't ordinarily see, so he wants to he wants us to strive for ultimate freedom, to find an escape. Until we find an escape, it's like you are on a driverless bus. And you get on the driving seat, you get on the wheel, then only you can stop this bus. So the Buddha's whole point of teaching is to kind of direct us on striving for ultimate freedom, so that you can stop the bus and escape. And Bhikkhu Bodhi explains, 4 suttas illustrate by means of memorable similes. So these similes are known by Sri Lankan communities a lot, because they hear these from monks, so they fear the samsara. The duration of a cosmic aeon. So the 4 similes explain the duration of a cosmic aeon, kappa. The singular word is kalpaya. So somebody asks, what is the length of a kalpaya or kappa? Then these similes have been given. So this is the only way even the Buddha could answer. Of which countless numbers have elapsed. So in parentheses, you find the sutra numbers. And Sutra 1510 reinforces the point with its image of the heap of bones one person leaves behind in the course of a single aeon. Bones, that's because you are born and you pass away as an animal, or maybe you will be born as a human being, or as an elephant, or as a whale. And so if you collect these skeletons, the bones, reinforces the point with its image of the heap of bones one person leaves behind in the course of a single aeon. So let's find out that part where the Buddha talks about the bones. You will soon go in there. Particularly stirring, it's the discourse to the 30 bhikkhus from Pava on the frightful dangers of samsara. A sutta powerful enough to bring all of them to the realization of arahantship right on the spot. So I think Venerable Mahinda, when he gave this talk, Anula already was an Anagami nun, a non-returner nun. Anagami meaning you are not returning to enjoy any sensual pleasures upon death. You are born in a Brahma world. When she was in that mental state, Arahant Mahinda taught from the Anamatagga Samyutta, stirring inspiration for them to not to cling into samsara at all. The final sutta in the chapter gives us a retrospective overview of the epochs during which three past Buddhas lived, with some information about conditions of human life during their dispensations. I read that part last night, and I find, the Buddha talking about the mountain that he saw, and he then say this mountain it had a different name, so many hundreds of thousands of years ago, and people at that time lived some 40,000 years. Okay, so this is the introduction, and let me go to the original beginning of the discourses here. This is where the chapter 5, Anamatagga Samyutta, begins. So the first sutra is grass and wood. Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's grove, Anathapindika's park. There, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus thus. Said, bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, those bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. The first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering unhindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. The onion union here. Suppose, bhikkhus, a man would cut up whatever grass, sticks, branches, and foliage there are in the Jambudipa. So you collect all the grass, all the sticks, all the branches, all the green from entire India and collect them together into a single heap. You make a huge one heap from all that. Having done so, he would put them down, saying for each one, this is my mother. This is my mother's mother. The sequence of that man's mothers and grandmothers would not come to an end. Yet the grass, wood, branches, and foliage in this Jambudipa would be used up and exhausted. So now there's a huge collection of sticks and branches and grass, and you take each piece and drop it on the ground and say, this was my mother, this was my grandmother. And that entire heap ends. But what doesn't end? The samsara still is even longer than that. For what reason? Because this samsara is without discoverable beginning. The first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. For such a long time, monks, you have experienced suffering, anguish, disaster, and swelled the cemetery. Swelling cemetery means you get buried again, you get buried again. So you kind of become piled up. So then the Buddha says, it is enough to experience revulsion towards all formations. Revulsion here, this is a word for kalakirenawa in Sinhala. Towards all formations, sielu sanskara, all the formations. Anything that is born, anything that is dear to you. Because we are attached to this, we don't give ourselves a break. We kind of exhaust our life satisfying these needs, and ultimately never find a break, never find an escape, and we die and add ourselves into that pile of cemetery, the soil in the cemetery. So then the Buddha says, enough to be liberated from them. This alone, knowing this alone is enough to be liberated from them. Knowing just this is, this. So he was addressing these monks, and the monks were told, just know that and think about that. And that alone should be enough for you to find an escape. Let's go to the next one. The second one is the simile on earth. So same in Savatthi, because this samsara is without discoverable beginning. The first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering unhindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. Highlight these two. I'm going to bring them up again towards the end of the teaching. Suppose monks, a man would reduce this great earth to balls of clay the size of jujube kernels. This is called debarata in Sinhala. Put them down. So little small rounds you make with clay, the clay of the earth, and put them down, saying for each one, this is my father, this is my father's father. The sequence of that man's fathers and grandfathers would not come to an end. Yet this great earth would be used up and exhausted. For what reason? Because this samsara is without discoverable beginning. The first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering unhindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. For such a long time, monks, you have experienced suffering, anguish, and disaster, same as before. So let's move on to the next one. Tears. This is Asu Sutra. At Savatthi, monks, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. The first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering unhindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. What do you think, monks? Which is more? The stream of tears that you have shed as you roamed and wandered on through this long course, weeping and wailing, because of being united with the disagreeable. So things that you don't like, you have to live with them, then you weep. And separated from agreeable, the things that you like, you'll have to, be separated from them, so you cry. So now you have tears, all that tears, or the water in that four great oceans. The entire ocean at that time was called the four great oceans. So when the four great oceans put together, what is big? The tears you have shed or the water in this four great oceans? And the monks reply, as we understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, the stream of tears that we have shed as we roamed and wandered through this long course, weeping and wailing because of being united with the disagreeable and separated from the agreeable, this alone is more than the water in the four great oceans. You get the answer. So the Buddha also approves of that. And at the end, the Buddha says, for a long time, monks, you have experienced the death of a mother, as you have experienced this weeping and wailing because of being united with the disagreeable and separated from the agreeable. The stream of tears that you have shed is more than the water in the four great oceans. He continues on saying, you have experienced the death of a father, death of a brother, the death of a sister, the death of a son, the death of a daughter, the loss of relatives, the loss of wealth, loss through illness, and then you weep and shed tears. As you do that, you have shed tears greater than the the water in the four great oceans. And then another interesting simile, mother's milk. The Buddha is asking here, bhikkhus, which is more, the mother's milk that you have drunk as you roamed and wandered on through this long course, this, or the water in the four great oceans? These monks knew the answer. They said, as we understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, the mother's milk that we have drunk as we roamed and wandered on through this long course, this alone is more than the water in the four great oceans. So the Buddha repeats that and approves of that. And then another sutra that is called Mountain comes. A certain monk goes to the Buddha, paid homage to him and sat down to one side and said to him, Venerable Sir, how long is an aeon? Kalpayak කියන්නේ කොච්චර දිග කාලයක්ද? How long is an aeon? An aeon is long. Bhikkhu, the Buddha says, it is not easy to count it and say it is so many years, or so many hundreds of years, or so many thousands of years, or so many hundreds of thousands of years. Then this monk says, then is it possible to give a simile, Venerable Sir? Can you give an upamavak? Then the Buddha says, it is possible, monk. It's possible, Bhikkhu, the Blessed One said. Suppose, Bhikkhu, there was a great stone mountain, a yojana long. A yojana is, I think, is 7 miles. A yojana wide and a yojana high, without holes or crevices, one solid mass of a rock. At the end of every 100 years, so at the end of every 100 years, a man would stroke it once with a piece of Khasian cloth, very fine cloth. You take a piece of cloth and you are, rubbing it on that rock. That great stone mountain might by this effort be worn away. So, it's only done once every 100 years. And then the stone will, come to disappear someday. So long is an aeon, Bhikkhu. And of aeons of such length, we have wandered through so many aeons, so many hundreds of aeons, so many thousands of aeons, so many hundreds of thousands of aeons. So it's just one aeon is that long. But we have wandered in samsara hundreds of thousands of aeons. For what reason? Because this samsara is without discoverable beginning. It is enough to be, knowing that it is enough to be liberated from that. If we don't now, we won't in the future. And then the famous mustard seed simile comes. Certain monk approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him and sat down to one side and said to him, Venerable Sir, how long is an aeon? Same question. An aeon is long, monks. It's not easy to count it and say it is so many years, or so many hundreds of years, or so many thousands of years, or so many hundreds of thousands of years. Then he is also asking for a simile. The Buddha gives a simile. Suppose, Bhikkhu, there was a city with iron walls, a yojana long, yoduna digai, a yojana wide, and a yojana high, filled with mustard seeds as dense as top knot. At the end of every 100 years, a man would remove one mustard seed from there. So in that huge, I would say, iron box, a city with iron walls, and you fill that city with mustard seed, so big walls, and you only take one mustard seed every 100 years. And then the Buddha says, the great heap of mustard seeds, the abhaya taking එක might by this effort be depleted and eliminated, but the aeon would still not have come to an end. You see, so long is an aeon, monks, and of aeons of such length we have wandered through so many aeons. It's not that one aeon, so many hundreds of aeons, so many thousands of aeons. Hundreds of thousands of aeons for what reason? Because monks, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. It's enough to be liberated from them. Knowing that alone is enough to be liberated from. And now, this sutra is Savaka Sutra, disciples. At Savatthi, then a number of bhikkhus approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side and said to him, Venerable Sir, how many eons have elapsed and gone by? So this is a slightly different question. Up to this point, the Buddha, so where the Buddha was living, this monk is asking, how many eons have elapsed and gone by? And the Buddha says, because many eons have elapsed and gone by. It is not easy to count them and say, there are so many eons, or so many hundreds of eons, or so many thousands of eons, or so many hundreds of thousands of eons. But is it possible to give a simile? Then the Buddha gives a simile. Suppose, monks, there were 4 disciples here, each with a lifespan of 100 years. So there are 4 disciples, maybe 4 monks, and each of them has 100 years. Living a 100 years, and each day they were each to recollect 100,000 eons. So they were in their memory, through their recollection skills, per day, what do? They go into meditation and they recollect. They think, they cover how many eons? They were each to collect 100,000 eons. 100,000 eons they recollect per day. They are able to go and find the roots of 100,000 eons. There would still be eons not yet recollected by them when those 4 disciples, each with a lifespan of 100 years, living 100 years, would pass away at the end of 100 years. They will pass away at the end of their 100 years after recollecting 100,000 eons each day. Today they recollect 100,000 years. Tomorrow another 100,000, actually not years, eons. And a day after tomorrow 100,000 eons. And now they reach to 100 into 365 days. And at the end of their lifespan, there is more eons left that they have not counted. They have not recollected. It is not easy to count them and say that there are so many eons, or so many hundreds of eons, or so many thousands of eons, so many hundreds of thousands of eons. For what reason, monks? Because this samsara is without discoverable beginning. It is enough to be liberated from them. This is also that simile. And then we have a sutra called the River Ganges. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. Then a certain Brahmin approached the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, he sat down to one side and said to him, Master Gautama, how many eons have elapsed and gone by? The same question. So who is asking this question? A certain Brahmin, like a Hindu priest. Then the Buddha says, Brahmin, many eons have elapsed and gone by. It's not easy to count them and say they are so many eons, so many hundreds of eons, or so many thousands of eons, so many hundreds and thousands of. And the same goes to the stick. I'm going to skip that part because it's kind of repeating the same thing. But the simile, the Buddha says, it is possible, Brahmin. The Buddha gives a simile. The grains of sand between the point where the river Ganges originates and the point where it enters the great ocean. So it's not easy to count these and say, so the beginning of the river Ganges, wherever the beginning is, and between the two shores, you count the sand. The Buddha says, it's not easy to count these and say there are so many grains of sand, or so many hundreds of grains, or so many thousands of grains, or so many hundreds of thousands of grains. Brahmin, the eons that have elapsed and gone by are even more numerous than that. So even after counting the sand, many eons are left uncounted. All right, so I think no matter how many times we read, we have now come to, I think, the 10th one, 9th and 10th. Let's read those also. Because this samsara is without discoverable beginning, the first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving, just as a stick thrown up into the air falls now on its bottom, now on its side, and now on its top. So it kind of jumps and falls back again and again. As beings roam and wander unhindered by ignorance and fettered by craving, now they would go from this world to the other world. Now they come from the other world to this world. For what reason? Because this samsara is without discoverable beginning. The same conclusion again. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Rajagaha here. Venerable Sir, so the Buddha says this samsara is without discoverable beginning. I think I'm repeating the same thing as we go. So the conclusion here is that heap of bones one person leaves behind with the passing of a single aeon would form a heap as high as a mountain. So said the great sage. The great sage here is the Buddha. So let me see how much time I have. It's 1:36. So we have about 1 hour. But when one sees with correct wisdom the truths of the noble ones, suffering and its origin, the overcoming of suffering, and the noble eightfold path that leads to suffering, appeasement, then that person, having wandered on for 7 more times at most, makes an end to suffering by destroying all the fetters. So 7 times at most. Here, when someone has become a stream winner, it says at most, you don't have to be born 7 times, but at most you will be born only with, you will realize the arahantship within the 7 lifetimes that comes after this, after ending this birth. And you will make an end to suffering by destroying all the fetters. So becoming a stream winner is a little escape, a big escape actually. And having escaped that, now you have within, because your mind is less, dealing with less defilements now. And at the end, you are able to bring it forward, perhaps with each birth, or within 3 births, or within 1 birth, and you put an end to all the fetters, and that you are freed. So let's kind of gather our thoughts here without reading. Now, when the Buddha became enlightened, what were the questions that bothered him? This is my teaching. Now I'm approaching to talk about the dependent origination. So dependent on one thing, another thing is born. So what were the things that bothered the Buddha, the Bodhisattva, before he left, before he renounced the palace, seeking some answers to the questions? What were the questions he had? He was looking at birth, decay, death, and illness. It's like 4 rocks coming towards us to take us. Birth, decay, illness, and death. He was asking himself, why our beings have to go through birth, decay, illness, and death? What is the reason behind this? This is the kind of line of questioning he had. Why do you think do we all go through birth, decay, illness, and death? What kind of birth do we talk about here? The birth of all the beings, different beings are born in different places. And we are born as human beings. And our mind, if you look at your mind also goes through different birth and death. Hundreds of thousands, millions times your mind goes through birth and death, birth and death. When the body dies, we discard it away and another body. We make conditions for another body to arise. Why is that? That is all because of being born. Jati paccaya jara maranam. Soka parideva dukkha domanassa upayasa sambhavanti. Because of jati, because of birth, we have jara, that is decay, maranam, death, soka, grief, parideva, lamentation, dukkha, pain or suffering, domanassa, unsatisfactoriness, upayasa, despair. This is called the whole mass of suffering. This we experience. We experience grief because we are born. If you are born, it's inevitable that you go through grief in this life. At some point in your life, you have felt the grief of someone dear dying, someone dear falling sick, someone dear gone from your life, or your parents passing. This is the thing about human conditions. Look at those animals that you see. Do animals have emotions? They do. They also go through, you have seen dogs when their friend die. It could be their son or daughter that die. They would go closer to them and spend days and night, with grief, refusing to eat. That's because of their birth. How many places can we be born? We are born in 4 ways: Andaja, Jalabhuja, Sansedaja, and Opapatika. So Andaja is, that's a way of being born in an egg. Jalabhuja is being born from a mother's womb. Sansedaja is being born in wet surfaces. A fruit. In a fruit, it's a wet surface. When it's starting to rot, you see little worms born in it. So they are born in there. Opapatika. So automatically you arise in some place. Like you are born in heavenly realms, that is a birth that is Paticca. So these 4 ways you are born in some place in the cycle of birth and death. So now you found, some answers in the links of the dependent origination. The, jati, jara, vyadhi, marana, soka, parideva, dukkha, domana, sopayasa. These things are born dependent on your birth. Because you are born in one of these places, you go through, decay, you go through illness, you go through grief, despair, lamentation, weeping, rattaling, khandati. You kind of hit your heart, your chest, and weep. You've seen that in many places when people have so much grief, they are just hitting their chest. The Buddha saw that and he said, Urattaling khanda, ura is your chest. Khandati, you kind of hit that. And you do that when you are grief stricken. That's how much you love the person. How much grief you feel is how much love you had towards that person. Tears coming out. And you cry and cry days on end, months on end, years on end. You put your head down on a desk and you begin to think about the memories you shared with this person. You put your head in the bed and you begin to think about those memories you shared. So if the person wasn't born, if you were not born, you wouldn't have experienced that. So the Buddha found at least some answers to the questions that he was looking for. But then he didn't stop. Then he began questioning, why are people born? Why are people born? People are born because of bhava. Bhava pacca jati. As I mentioned earlier, you have different ways being born. You are born in a wet surface, or you are born or you arise automatically in some place. You are born in a mother's womb. You are born in wet surfaces. So you are born in all kinds of, in any place you can find beings who are born in these places. But then you also have a bhava. What are the bhavas that you experience? Kama bhava, rupa bhava, and arupa bhava. These are the places where birth happens. So bhava pacchaya jati. Because of bhava, you are born. What is bhava here? Kama bhava. Kama bhava is sensual realm, sensual world. And that includes humans, heavenly beings, and also the hell realm, apaya places, derogatory hell. These are all in Kama Bhava. So Rupa Bhava. Some people go beyond the sensual realm. They go beyond. Vivicceva kamehi, vivicceva akusalehi dhammehi. They experience the jhana. They go beyond the karma experiences. In doing meditation, they surpass any human, the human world, sensual world, and they experience the Rupa Bhava. The jhana are called Rupa experiences. So there are 16 places that you can be born when you experience Rupa jhanas. First jhana, second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana. So when you have experienced any of those, when you die, you are born in some of these 16 Brahma worlds and you stay there. And some even go beyond the jhanas. They go to samapattis. Samapattis are four: infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and neither perception nor non-perception. These are called samapattis. These are not rupa. These are called arupa samapattis. Then you will be born accordingly in arupa bhava. So then the Buddha discovered, as he was meditating, he discovered that bhavapacha jati, because these planes exist, not that they exist, you create the planes through you reaching to these places. You know, Alar Kalama and Uddakaram Putta, they both attain to samapattis. And they are still there. There is a certain length, an uncountable number of, in human time, that's uncountable. They stay there that long. At that point, nobody had taught that you can put an end to a samapatti. They thought that was the end that they could reach. And the Buddha discovered, no, that's not the end. And this is how he discovered. So bhavapacha jati, what is the reason for bhava? He started questioning. So now you notice that when I started talking about Paticca Samuppada, the dependent origination, I didn't start from avijja. I started from the end. So there are two ways you can do this examination: anuloma and patiloma, ascending order and descending order. So now you start from the end and you go in, you know that the Bodhisattva, when he renounced the palace, he was 29, and he had these questions. Why are people decay? Why do they decay? Why do they get sick? So that's where we started our line of questioning. That's where he started his line of questioning. So we are kind of going backwards here. And you found that there are many bhavas, kama bhava, rupa bhava, and arupa bhava, as places that a human or any other being could be born. Even if you are born in heavenly realm, in Samyutta Nikaya there are sutras, in Anguttara Nikaya also. Sometimes when a heavenly being pass away, their radiance is not as strong as the radiance they had before. And then the signs of them passing away arise. And then the heavenly beings come, flocking together and to try to help their friend. They say, when you go to human world, or maybe when you go to other worlds, try to engage in good karma, earn more merits, and come back to see us, and come back to indulge with us. So they cannot stop. Only at that last moment, sometimes they realize that their time in heaven ends. And when that happens, these heavenly beings try to help their friend, arousing, happiness. You have done so many good karma, you have given, you have not be practiced misery, you didn't collect, you were not greedy, you have looked after the venerable monks in the Savatthi monasteries, in Ubbarama monasteries, you have done this, you have done that. So they kind of remind their friend about the good things he has done. And sometimes that alone is enough for them to have another aeon of birth in heaven. They are born again in that heaven. So, what is the cause behind bhava? Right? Upadana pachaya bhava. Because of clinging. Because of clinging, there is bhava. There is existence. Upadana pachaya bhava. You cling to something. What do you cling to? You cling to some place. You cling to Kama Bhava, then you are born in there. You cling to Rupa Bhava, then you are born accordingly. You cling to Arupa Bhava, then you are born accordingly. Right? It's endless. You have many places to be cling to. And now you begin questioning again. What is the reason for upadana? What is the reason for clinging? The reason for clinging is tanha paccaya upadana. Craving is the reason for clinging. Tanha. You have kama tanha, you have bhava tanha, you have vibhava tanha. Kama tanha is tanha, craving for indulging in kama, sensual pleasures. Bhava tanha is, you think that you have so many births in the future, and you may as well enjoy them. You think that you are permanently existing, yourself, your Atman is permanent, so you have that ditti, the wrong view, and you continue to indulge. And then you may as well think that after death there is no continuity. Nobody taught you that way, you don't believe it, you don't think that there is a birth after death. So you try to have vibhava tanha. There is no bhava, vibhava. There is an annihilation. And because of that view, that erroneous view, you begin indulging in lots of things within this life. Yava jivet sukhang jivet. As long as you live, enjoy, have fun, and pranang krutva gritang pived. Even by taking debts, take loans, and take ghee for loans. Ghee as a delicacy, you eat it with many things, and just enjoy. Means ghee is also a way that you can have energy in the body, especially sexual energy. And when you have when you are eating cheese and all kinds of things, that means you want to enjoy this life as much as possible. So that is one way to crave. Craving is that fall. Kamatanha, bhavatanha, vibhavatanha. When you have any kind of these cravings, you start clinging and you are born accordingly. And then the Buddha began questioning the Bodhisattva here, as I think he must have been enlightened as he was he was becoming enlightened as he was reflecting these. As he knew that he saw many beings being born according to their karma. Many beings have been born that way and will continue to be born. And now he discovered several links of the birth. And what is the reason for craving? Right? What is the reason for craving? Vedana paccaya tanha. Because people love their feelings, or they dislike certain feelings. Vedana, they feel the feelings. They feel sukha vedana, they feel dukkha vedana, they feel adukkhama sukha vedana. They feel sukha, pleasant feelings, dukkha, unpleasant feelings, and adukkhama sukha feelings, adukkhama asukha feelings, neither painful nor pleasant feelings. When they feel any of these feelings, you can feel sukha vedana as an ordinary human being by, when you have had a hard day at work, you come home and all you need to do is not to even talk to anybody, you just need to collapse and sleep. That's the sukha that you experience. Upon waking up, you feel fresh, you feel good. You want to enjoy a good meal and you feel good. You want to get married to a desired person, you feel good. So that is one way, that you kind of indulge in feelings. And then adukkam, dukkha vedana. Certain dukkha we love. We love feeling, sometimes we cry and we want to show others that we cry. So we cry more and we think repeatedly, and you are depressed, but that's what you want. Because of that, you are attached to that feeling. As long as you are attached, you can bring tears up. As you bring tears up, you love it more and your desire is fulfilled. And because you dislike certain things in your life, you reject some people and you like some others. In your language, the way you talk, you don't know that others understand it, but you kind of talk that certain way because your mind is put into that frame and you are not able to see it. So that's because you dislike some people and you like some others. And what is the other feeling? So because of this disliking, you go more towards craving, more towards the things that you like. The other one is neither painful nor pleasant feeling. That's upekha. You experience highest upekha when you experience samapattis. Samapattis such as infinite space, infinite consciousness, neither nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception. These are samapattis that you experience. And there you have equanimity. Beyond third jhana, you experience equanimity. Begin slowly experiencing equanimity, and Alar Kalam and Uddaka Ramaputta, they went to some highest levels of equanimity, and that you take as yourself, because you can in meditation stay for a long, long time. In that staying, you think this is the end. There is no further to go. Because you think that way, you continue to cling onto that. That is the highest feeling you experience. Imagine a body-free state. This body gives us a lot of pain. Sitting in one posture, it gives you pain. You have to change the posture. Now you are free from it. Thoughts give you a lot of pain. Now you are also free from thoughts, but you stay in equanimity, upekha, in such a balanced state, nothing arising, and you think that is the end. You stay there forever and ever. So feelings that way can be cheating. Feelings may give you a wrong view. So Vedana Paccha Tanha. What is the reason for feeling? Then the Bodhisattva began questioning, what is the reason for feeling? The reason for feeling is contact. Passa Paccha Vedana. Contact is the reason for feeling. You have contact through your ear. If the ear existed without consciousness, if the ear existed as an object, the object doesn't do anything. For it to become an ayatana, chakku ayatana, for it to become a chakku ayatana, consciousness has to be involved. So eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness, these 6 consciousness, together with eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. With these 6 interacting with 6 consciousnesses, contact arises. How does a contact arise? There are forms that you see, sounds that you hear, and smells that you can smell, like fragrances, and tastes, and physical feelings, and also the thoughts. Meeting of these things, meaning there is contact. the Buddha now started seeing another link. Because of contact, there arises feelings. Feelings arise because of contact. If the material body existed without having any contact, no feelings will arise. And there, the Blessed One started questioning again, what is the reason for contact? Salayatana paccaya passo, because of the 6 sense bases. Salayatana, ayatana is a base. Because of the 6 sense bases, there is contact. Salayatana paccaya passo. The conditioning here, because of the 6 sense bases, there is contact. If the 6 objective bases didn't exist, there won't be a subjective reality. There won't be a subjective person in here. That's how he understood it. The reason for contact to arise is because your 6 sense bases. Is that clear to you? Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Because of these 6 sense bases, contact arises. As you know, in Madhupindika Sutra, the Buddha says, Tinnan Sangati Passo. Meeting of the 3 is contact. Meeting of what 3? Take one, for example. You have an eye, and you see an object, right? From your eye, you see me on the screen now. If you didn't have the eye, if you didn't see this object, you won't be seeing me. Now, and also you become conscious on me. You can be conscious on other things while looking at this screen. But now you are looking at me, you are conscious on me. So now eye consciousness arose. So the eye and the form and eye consciousness, meeting of these 3 gives birth to contact. Tinnang Sangati, Tune Ekatuva, Passo. That is the contact. So now you are discovering more and more on dependent origination. Dependent co-origination. These things co-originate, like cooperative. They originate together. Samuppada. It's not dependent uppada, not paticca uppada. It is paticca samuppada. It becomes paticca samuppada. So samuppada means arising together. These things have to be separately seen, like you are undoing a car and identifying different pieces. This is the wheel, this is the pedal and all that, the gas. So you see different pieces when you are examining this way. How much time do we have? We have about 30 minutes to go. So we may also come across a quick Q&A session, but let's continue our exploration. And now you were in Passa and also Salayatana, Salayatana Paccaya Passo. What is the reason for Salayatana to arise? Why do we have 6 sense bases? Nama Rupa Paccaya Salayatana. Nama Rupa. Salayatana exists, when you are born as a fetus. So, kalalayak vidiyata uppattiya labuwahama, you have to have 3 things coming together. Mother and the union of mother and father, and fetus arising, and then a consciousness descending, viññānassa pāturāhuti, consciousness arising, gandhabbo cha agama, the being descends into that fetus. Mata utuni hoti, mother is in proper season, and the union of mother and father happens. And for that, if the piece of meat just existed all alone, it won't grow. Nama Rupa has to descend. The Gandhabba has to descend into that place. And then only a growth happens. Sometimes a Gandhabba won't come. So the fetus kind of gets washed away from the mother's womb. This you have heard many hundreds times that not all the time mother is able to bring the child into the full course of 10 months, full term, and deliver the baby. A Namarupa has to, Namarupa here means Gandhabba has to come. So that means, what is Nama and Rupa? Heavenly, without a physical body, without having a gross salayatana, without having eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind in a form that you can see, Namarupa can exist. Namarupa has been translated in many ways. Mentality is Nama, materiality is Rupa. Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo is Rupa, and Nama is the rest, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. So this is Nama, naming something. Name and form is another way to translate it. Name and form. Form, F-O-R-M here. So name is Nama, Rupa is form. So the Buddha, found that Nama Rupa, Nama Rupa Pacchaya Salayatana. If Nama Rupa didn't occur, 6 ayatanas will not be born. The 6 ayatanas, Salayatana, depend on mentality and material, Nama Rupa. You see that. So Nama Rupa, if Nama Rupa didn't occur, 6 sense bases will not occur. So you don't see heavenly beings, but the teachings say that heavenly beings exist. Why? Because they have Nama Rupa. You don't see an eye that is physical, but they have an eye. It's like inscribed. It's like a print. That's why the Buddha says, Chakkung bhikkave purana kamma. It's because of past karma that you have an eye. And before even you having an eye, before even eye being formed, there is an eye that exists in the subtle form. That is the Nama Rupa. Now you heard me saying Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. These 4 are called Nama. I think I covered what is Vedana. I covered Sanya, as I was talking about, different Sanyas, red Sanya, blue Sanya, different Sanyas. And Sankara, I will cover Sankara as I come to the roots, as I'm discovering more. And Vijnana, I have covered like eye consciousness. Vijnana is consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, different consciousnesses. So not to worry about Nama here. These are ways that we name a being. And what is the reason for Nama Rupa? Vijnana Pacchaya Nama Rupa. You become conscious on mentality and materiality. And because of your consciousnesses, Nama Rupa exist. Chakku Vijnana, Rupa Vijnana, all these Nama, Chakku Vijnana, Sota Vijnana, Gana Vijnana, these consciousnesses give birth to Nama Rupa. So Nama Rupa Pacchaya Salayatana, and earlier Vijnana Pacchaya Nama Rupa. Because of consciousness, you have to have consciousness for Nama Rupa to continue. And why do we have consciousness? Then the Buddha began questioning. So now we come to the beginning of it. Sankara, Pacchaya Vijnana. Because of Sankara, we have Vijnana. We have three kinds of Sankara. Punyabhi Sankara, Apunyabhi Sankara, and Aninjabhi Sankara. What is Punyabhi Sankara? What is Apunyabhi Sankara? What is Aninjabhi Sankara? We do merits, Punya. We do Apunya, what is not merits. And accordingly we are born. What is Aninjabhi Sankara? It's also a Sankara. Aninjabhi Sankara is, Punyabi Sankara, you do Punya in sensual realms. Apunyabi Sankara, you cultivate jhanas and you are born accordingly. Aninjabi Sankara is like Akasananchayatana, Vinyananchayatana, Akinchanyayatana, Nevasanyana. And because these are still Sankaras, you are still destined to be born. You see, anything Sankara, the Buddha said, Sabbe Sankara Anicchati. All these Sankaras are impermanent. So the Buddha never appreciated you going to Akasananchayatana and being born in the Brahma world and staying there forever. The Buddha never appreciated you going to neither perception or non-perception through meditation and being born there, in a place accordingly and living there forever. He said that is also an impermanent Sankara. All the constituent things are transitory. They change and change again. Change is the only thing that does not change. That's what the Buddha said. Changing happens all the times. And that is how the Buddha was awakened to the 12 links of dependent origination. He began questioning why birth happens, and then why why grief happens, and why we are getting sick and all that. That's because of birth. And why birth happens, that's because bhava pacha jati. And why bhava happens because of upadana. Why upadana happens because of tanha. Why tanha happens because of vedana. Why vedana happens, what is dependent on it. Vedana happens because of phassa, the contact. Why contact happens because of salayatana. Why salayatana happens because of namarupa. Why namarupa happens because of vijnana. Why vijnana happens because of sankara pacha vijnana. So backward and forward, avidya pacha sankara. And then he found ignorance is the main reason, because you don't see the truth. This truth, the whole truth of how suffering arises, and the truth that craving is the cause of this suffering, and the truth that you can put an end to this craving, and the truth that there is a path to reach to this end, the cessation of the path towards cessation, because you are ignoring these truths. You are full of ignorance, and that way you don't see that you have been wandering in endless, beginningless samsara, going from birth to death, and your bones that you have collected is more than the bones are less compared to the beginningless samsara. Hope that is clear. It was clear to me. So it's 2:18. Do you have any questions? Let me share stop screen sharing. So I have group view here. I see 15 people attending the Zoom. Please do ask questions. So I feel worth doing this talk. Take a moment to reflect. This is not the only time we have covered teachings like this. Now you see why Arahant Mahinda must have covered, he wanted to stir some way in people, the urgency to not hold on to samsara. When you have become a non-returner, Anagami person, once this monk became an Anagami, went to the Buddha and said, I like to end the rest of my defilements in the Brahma world. And then the Buddha said, Asuchi dingat tibunat gandai, godat tibunat gandai. That's the answer of the Buddha. Any feces, whether it's little or a big amount, is still it's bad smelling. So that's how the Buddha responded. So he never encouraged anyone. He said, Kippang vayama pandito bhava. Strive diligently and become a wise person. So for us, the path towards becoming a wise person is seeing the dependent origination, seeing how the arising of dukkha happens, how the cessation of dukkha happens. When this exists, that exists. When this does not exist, that doesn't exist. The birth of this means the birth of that. The killing of this, or cessation of this, is the cessation of that. That's the formula that he taught, and this is why Arahant Mahinda must have taught this to the on after Poson Day to Queen Anula and her following to the king and all the Sri Lankans. And still now, we monks came here because of Arahant Mahinda and because he brought Buddhism to Sri Lanka, because Buddhism started thriving in Sri Lanka. Any king in Sri Lanka, any ruler in Sri Lanka has to be a Buddhist. So that is how the constitution is laid in Sri Lanka. And that's why even when Nayakar kings came from India in 1700s, they became the guardians of the tooth relic. Even when British reigned in Sri Lanka, they kept the tooth relic as their guard. They became guardians of the tooth relic because they knew that it has to be. They have to give priority to Buddhism in governing the country. Anyway, looks like you don't have questions. Those who ask questions become wiser. I'm sorry that those who don't ask questions won't become wiser when you are born again, if you wish to be born again. Anyway, let's end the talk here. Thank you for Jivanona seems to be connecting. So don't be discouraged. What we covered today is little deeper Dhamma. And one time Venerable Ananda went to the Buddha and said, I understand that dependent origination is so simple. And the Buddha said, Mahevang Ananda, don't ever say that. This teaching is so profound, so deep. So do not ever say that this teaching is simple. So what you experienced today, I explained it the way I understand it. And I have listened to Dhamma talks. Particularly, there is a talk given by Kaligama Jnanadeepa Hamduro that Ujita Mahatmya shared with me. And I listened to it a couple of times. He goes to Pali courts and he explains it so beautifully. I listened to his other talks. They were not on Paticca Samuppada, but this particular one, he laid down very well. Anybody having a question? You can unmute yourself, maybe. I see. The cycle starts from ignorance, but Buddha teaching mainly focused on craving. And Buddha's first words after enlightenment mentioned about destroying of builder of the house, which is craving. Why didn't Buddha say destroying of ignorance, beginning root, cause to end the suffering? So this is a great question. Why did the Buddha? I think this comes to the practice. When you do meditation, you kind of eliminate, something that you can first grab onto. Before you seek, ignorance as the root cause, there is a long way to go. We are taught, ignorance is dispelled right after Buddha arose to this world. Vijja Udapadi, Aloka Udapadi. Now truth arose. Ignorance disappeared. Avijja disappeared. So Vijja Udapadi. Vijja arose to the world. But in the human experience, as a human being, it's easy to see these teachings. And if you eliminate craving, then only you are able to kind of put, and stay away from the human body. Because of craving, you don't take a break from human body. You crave you crave to stay in this body. You don't even, a dead body is heavy, but in meditation, if you feel that your body is heavy, you feel like you are dead and you suddenly wake up. That's because you are attached to this body. So that's my response. I'm not sure if it is clear. If you want me to explain more, please mention that in the chat box. And Chandra Tilaka Nona says, according to Anamatagga Sutta, okay. And then she says she made a mistake. Earlier, somebody said there were noises. Sorry about that, because we have birds living in Sankit Hamduro's room. We are doing the program in the shrine room, but when they hear voices, they want to join. So you heard the bird voices. We cannot, put plasters into their mouths. So we didn't want to do that. Anyway, shall we end? So let's transfer merits. Dhamme ñāti nang hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo. Idhamme ñāti nang hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo. Idhamme ñāti nang hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo. Taminde Gudaheva Mahatmage Adarniya Mehniyan Natuna Shriyani Gudaheva. ඊය අපි ළමයින්ගේ ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑම් එක කරන අතරතුරේ තමයි නැති වුණේ. මේ දමින් දෙගොඩ හේවා Mahatma's mother, Shriyani Gudaheva, who passed away in Sri Lanka, attained the supreme bliss of Nibbana with the merits that we are transferring right now after listening to this talk. Let's also transfer merits to heavenly beings. Akasattha cha bhummattha devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakhantu sasanang chiran rakhantu desanang chiran rakhantu tvang sada. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all reach to supreme bliss of Nibbana very soon. So I will end the talk, but the next talk starts at 2:45. Take a little short bathroom break and make a tea. You don't need the whole 30 minutes. That's a slight change in the program. right here, stay here. You don't have to leave the Zoom. And it's also being streamed on Facebook. And we will start. Bhante Sarananda come and start the talk right at 2:45. So stay tuned. Everyone, Sunday.
Everyone, Sarna, how are you?